Hi, this is your Watchman on the Wall, Hal Lindsey. I am going to go over something that's really fascinating to me. You know, since I wrote The Late Great Planet Earth, I've been talking about the fact that in the days just before the Battle of Armageddon and the return of the Messiah, Jesus Christ, that there would be a reformation of the Earth's powers. There'd be 4 spheres of political power that would become dominant in the world. And I talked about those 4 spheres. There's the Western power, which will be the revived Roman Empire, which is basically the European Union right now. And they will eventually become dominant over the other 3 until war breaks out. And then there's the power called the King of the North. And this is carefully spelled out in Ezekiel chapter 38 as being the power to the extreme north of Israel. Well, you go to the extreme north, and 3 times it says that. You go to the extreme north of Israel, and there's only one nation there, and that's Russia. And it even gives the tribal forefathers of the modern Russian people in the prophecy. So it's clear. The king of the north is Russia, and the power it would gather around it. Then there are the kings of the east, plural. And in the book of Revelation, chapters 16 and chapter 9, it refers to this power as having 200 million soldiers that will come into war once Armageddon starts. And then there's a power that's always been kind of mystical to all the prophecy students, the king of the south. Well, the sphere of power called the King of the South is spoken of in Daniel chapter 11. It's a fascinating chapter because it's a prophecy that predicted the course of powers in the world at that time, going from the time of Daniel and the Persian Empire in the 500s BC all the way up until Julius Caesar and the powers that exist after the falling apart of the Greek Empire and the rise of the Roman Empire. Even Julius Caesar and his alliance with Cleopatra is spelled out in chapter 11. After we come to the exploits of the Roman Empire, we come to a point where there's a giant leap in history made by the prophet. And in Daniel chapter 11, going through these prophecies of consecutive history, it comes to a point in verse 35 where it says, "And some of those who have insight will fall in order to be refined, purged, and make them pure until the time of the end, because it is still to come at the appointed time." At the time of the end, it then begins to spell out a prophet who would come up in Israel that Revelation chapter 13 identifies as one of the 2 antichrists, and he's called the false prophet. As he is developed in time, it comes to a point where it says, "And at the end time, or the time of the end, the king of the south will collide or make war with him." In other words, the king of the south will make war with this Jewish prophet, the one called the false prophet, the false Messiah, an antichrist. And the king of the south will make war with him, and it says the king of the north will also attack. And this is a war that begins to spread exponentially until it involves all the world. But the 2 powers that started are first, the one called the King of the South and the other called the King of the North. Well, as I went through Daniel chapter 11, I found that in each era of time in these prophecies, the King of the South would refer to whoever at that time of history was the dominant power to the south of Israel. And the king of the north would refer to the dominant or threatening power that was north of Israel. So applying that to today, I found that if you look for who is the king of the south, that would be south of Israel. There was a fascinating development, and the development of this was actually triggered by King Abdullah of Jordan making a statement relating to something else, because he said that Israel has got to begin negotiating to give the Palestinians a state, and they have to realize, Israel, that they're not just negotiating with Palestine, they're negotiating with 57 Muslim nations. And he was referring to the Organization of Islamic States Conference. They call the OIC. These Muslim nations fit into what has been dubbed by observers of this area as the 1040 window. The 1040 window refers to the geographical area between 10 degrees latitude north and 40 degrees latitude north. Enclosed within that, going all the way from the Atlantic over to the Pacific with the islands of Indonesia, you have the 57 Muslim nations. They dominate that area. Over 1 billion Muslims live within that area. All of North Africa is filled with members of the Muslim Alliance. And this goes over into the Middle East, and the area south of Europe extends through the Middle East over into Asia, where we have Afghanistan, we have Pakistan, Bangladesh, Malaysia, most importantly, Indonesia. Indonesia is the 4th largest populated state in the world, behind China, India, the United States, and Indonesia. And they're all Muslim. A very powerful force anchoring the Muslim influence, which I believe would be the king of the South today in that area. And so, as I observed this on the globe, I found another thing. If you look at the extent of Muslim power within this so-called 1040 window, Mecca is in the center, virtually in the center of this area. And so I believe that the Lord showed me in that this is the King of the South. And of course we can see developing right before our eyes the tremendous animosity. It's been latent for centuries, but now it's blowing into full hatred of this Jewish state. And according to prophecy, that would be one of the dominant powers in the 4 spheres of power that would exist in the world of the time when Armageddon would take place, and that would bring back the Messiah. Folks, I believe we're watching all of this being fulfilled right before our very eyes. You know, as I've said before, it used to be, say, 10, 20, 30 years ago, we could see some things developing that fit the prophetic scenario about the last days, and we could see it in broader detail. But now we're seeing it in very specific detail. And the King of the South is becoming a very, very powerful and troublesome sphere of power in this whole world. And I see our government under President Obama playing around trying to settle the issue between the Israelis and the Palestinians, which is never going to bring peace. You cannot make peace with a people who won't even recognize that you have a right to exist as an independent state, or that you have a right to be recognized as a Jewish state. They don't even want to make a long-term peace treaty with them anymore. They want to just make a 10-year peace treaty in order to sign and say that fulfills what the roadmap to peace required them to believe and to agree to, and what the Oslo Accords before it required them to agree to. So I believe that, the seeds of an ultimate world explosion are being sowed right now. And this power, the King of the South, in the 1040 window, is something that is developing in prophecy down to the details. It's getting close, folks. I believe the time of Christ's return is very near. It's time for everyone to really settle where they stand with God. Jesus has provided a full pardon for anyone who will come to him, admit he's a sinner, and simply receive that pardon and give his life to Jesus. If you're watching this on your computer, take a moment right now and just pray and receive the pardon, and just tell him you're willing for him to make you what he wants you to be. And that'll change your eternal destiny.